Now, it is time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should we fill the labour shortage with migrant workers? The Brexit-supporting chief executive of Next called on Rishi Sunak, he's Lord Wolfson, called on the Prime Minister to relax immigration rules and allow more foreign workers into Britain to alleviate chronic labour shortages. The Conservative peer said that the current restrictions on immigration were damaging growth and were definitely not the Brexit that he wanted. But he added that companies wanting to employ foreign workers should pay a 10% tax on their salaries to encourage them to recruit from Britain first. But with many people voting to leave the EU to limit the influx of foreign labour, his calls have been met with much criticism. Even Ukrainian refugees who left their war-torn country to build a better life here in the UK have gone back to Ukraine due to the cost of living crisis and poor working conditions. Yes, exactly. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should we fill labour shortages with migrant workers? I'm joined now by the Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe. Stephen, first of all, I want to ask you whether you agree with your fellow Brexiteer, Lord Wolfson, that we need to relax immigration rules and to alleviate the British labour market.
Well, we already have a reasonably relaxed immigration system for those who are coming in at the high end, or what you call the high earners, which actually is just over £35,000 a year. So companies have really invested by bringing people in from abroad. And we've actually seen an increase in the numbers of people who are foreign immigrants working here. The argument, though, for Lord Wolfson and for those who like to indulge in the idea that a British economy should continue to be a low-wage, low-investment, low-growth, low-education economy is let's bring in cheap labour from abroad, because we cannot persuade the government to make the effective changes which are necessary to improve productivity and the profitability of companies. And let me give you an example. For example, businesses in the pub trade, I know one particularly here in Winchester, has seen massive rises in electricity and gas prices. And rather than deal with the price gouging from BP and the energy companies and taking that money from them and giving it to those small businesses who could then pass it on in higher wages, no, what do? We decide that we want to have low wages to perpetuate that low-wage economy. And those people who are earning £10 or £11 an hour in a pub cannot live in Winchester, cannot live in the surrounding areas, and have to commute in from miles away. And that's the same scenario all across the country.
Yeah, but then he also pointed out that things like crops are rotting in fields because there aren't any people to pick them. Some warehouses are barely operable because there aren't enough people to run them. You know, he's saying that right now something needs to be done.
Well, let me take this as an example. 2 years ago, when this argument about crops rotting in the fields came up, I made an application for a couple of farms, and they came back and said that you're going to be earning around £9.50 working from 7 in the morning till 6 at night. Well, quite frankly, again, living in those areas, these are unpalatable wages in today's economy. What we should be seeing is people earning £20 an hour. But how do you achieve that without putting those businesses out of kilter? You don't raise income tax. You don't raise capital gains tax. You reduce business rates. You remove them completely. But there are two further points that we really need to consider. One is the selfishness of people like Lord Wolfson and those who want to bring people into this country from abroad. It's a form of reverse colonialism, as I was once told by an African ambassador, who said that we spend money training our own nurses and doctors to improve our own health services, only to see the NHS send out their teams to take our nurses at higher wages in the UK. So whether you're from the Philippines, whether you're from other countries, we are acting as colonialists by stealing wages and individuals with talent from their countries to fill our gaps because we won't invest.
Well, stay right there, Stephen, because I'm going to have a chat with Andy. He's a bar owner, Andy Jones. He's saying, well, what Stephen was saying there was in a sense that some people who are looking for these cheap employees are actually quite selfish in a sense. Andy, what do you think with regard to your own business? Because you're, I understand, suffering with this labour shortage and it's affecting you.
Absolutely. I employ between 40 and 50 people. I have about 5 or 6 gaps that I need to fill. And to be completely honest, in the past couple of years, it's been an absolute disaster just getting people to come in for an interview. We can't pay what we'd like to pay people in the hospitality industry. Our business rates are massive, as it's just been touched on. paying people 11, 12 pounds an hour in London is unfeasible for them to have a decent life away from work. Something's got to give. People need to come back into this country to fill this labour shortage, because I don't know where this is going to end. The hospitality industry is in dire straits. Rents in London are massive. Business rates in London are massive. We cannot fill the gaps that COVID left, the gaps that Brexit left, to get to a solid working platform.
But surely getting the foreign workers in will perpetuate your agony, because then, of course, the government won't bring down business rates, because they'll think, well, you've got cheap labour force in there and all the things that you need to make effective. Does Stephen have a really good point there? Is that he's saying that rather than bring in foreign workers, surely the emphasis should be on looking at the government and saying reduce business rates, do those things so that you can then effectively pay your staff properly?
We would love to be able to pay our staff more. And it comes down to three key factors. On food-led businesses, there should be a reduction in VAT. Down to 10% is the proposal. I should say that there's a big hospitality demo taking place in London on Monday, and they want 10% VAT, a reduction in business rates holiday, or complete scrapping of business rates, and the allowance of European workers to come back and work in the hospitality industry, because it's dying. The hospitality industry, especially in London, is dying. There are places closing every single day. I'd love to pay people more. I'd love to pay people 18, 19, 20 pounds an hour. It's simply not feasible.
Yeah, well, you said it's not feasible, but then I think you allude to Stephen's point that actually the reality is that, you need to pay people more to get them into the jobs, and there should be investing actually in the workforce within this country. But then you're still calling for workers from abroad. I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
Because there has to be some give. The hospitality industry is one of those things that it's still a fallback industry for so many people. It's hard to get people in their prime, in their 20s, in their early 30s to commit to a life of work in hospitality. A lot of people have bigger goals. A lot of people fall into hospitality and go on to have wonderful careers. That's exactly what I did. I grew up in it. I left it. I came back to it, and I've got businesses now that can relatively prosper. But it's hard to get people in their prime, university educated, people that want to go and do other things, to come and work in hospitality, wait tables, pull pints. It's really hard to do that.
On this. Well, Stephen, that's what he's saying, that actually it's hard to get people in there. So, irrespective of what's happening in the labour force and the wages.
Well, Andy's identified the first key point is that the biggest cost to increasing labour wages is the cost that governments are placing upon those businesses, as well as the additional inflationary costs that we've got as well through energy. So if you did that, you'd end up increasing wages. And why is that important? I'll give you an example for me. I've recently worked part-time in my local pub, and they're paying £9.80 an hour plus tips on there. That is not enough for me to sustain a life in Winchester, looking after my daughter as a single father. But I know that pub is under enormous pressure because of the raises in the cost of energy, their business rates. So the government should be helping the industry the other way around. There are people in their 50s like me, 1.5 million, who've left the marketplace, who would love to come back to work, but only if they get decent wages. And that's up to the government. Reduce VAT to zero for businesses such as Andy's, to ensure that you have no business rates for at least a year whilst we're going through this pandemic issue, to ensure that the energy companies are taking their money back and making the energy costs, which I'm sure Andy will tell you, I bet he's at about a 400% increase in his electricity gas costs.
Well, can I just ask you then?
That's nothing to do with immigration. It's all to do with government costings.
Well, the last word to you, and very briefly then, Andy. If those things that Stephen has suggested were in place, would you then look to, rather than ask, say, you want more people from abroad to come and work, would you then agree that actually we should be looking for people in this country?
We should be looking for people from our country, but we shouldn't limit it to looking at people from our country. I agree with everything that's just been said. The food-led businesses are getting absolutely pasted. The energy costs are huge. The rent in London, my rent is 130,000 a year. My business rate's at 48,000. It's insane. It's such a large amount of money, and then you've got 50 staff to pay on top of that. It's You wait until, and can I just touch on one point with the government helping out? Very quickly, the furlough money that was given to staff, amazing initiative. Okay, the businesses had to pick up the PAYE bill. We were closed for months and months and months, and I had a £9,000 a month PAYE bill.
Wow.
That is insane.
It is insane, Andy. We appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Andy Jones. He's a bar manager. And also thank you so much to Stephen Wolf as well. Really good to talk to you both.